Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. This week will be perceived by some to be a lot bigger on the Hot 100 than it actually is. Truth be told, there is more to say about the brief breakthrough of Sabrina Carpenter than another predictably slow week. And I'm not about to complain about that, but if you're expecting a huge outpouring towards a certain new arrival, well, I'm gonna give it the energy that it's worth. No more, no less. But before we get to that, our top 10, where to nobody's surprise at all, Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo is sitting at number 1 for a 4th straight week. Not in the top in sales, but her streaming and radio momentum means that she's not going to be unseated anytime soon. Now, Mood by 24kGoldn and Ian Dior still isn't quite as lucky. It's at number 2 because streaming is solid, but it is losing radio pretty fast. And this is where Blinding Lights by The Weeknd is set to make one last boost. The Super Bowl performance drew a lot of attention, and the song is still consistent enough in all channels to potentially rise above number 3, where it is right now. And I'm not sure 34 plus 35 by Ariana Grande featuring Megan Thee Stallion and Doja Cat on the remix is quite in the same boat. Streaming lost traction, and while the radio is moving forward, I'm not sure there's gonna be enough. Then there's Levitating by Dua Lipa featuring DaBaby at number 5. Yeah, sales are up, but it might be running out of gas on streaming and the radio, which are just not good signs. I do think Go Crazy by Chris Brown and Young Thug might be in trouble though. It's at number 6, but that radio momentum is not at all secure, and that's basically all it's got. Now granted, I don't expect Positions by Ariana Grande to really challenge it from number 7, because all it also basically now has is radio, which again, not a good sign. But we do have some interesting new developments in our last 3 songs here, starting with a breakthrough by The Weeknd for Save Our Tears at number 8. It's lagging a little bit on the radio, but the sales and especially the streaming, they are very much there to make a push. Very promising. Hell, blew right past Holy by Justin Bieber featuring Chance the Rapper at number 9, where all it really has is radio, and it's losing even faster. Finally, and I cannot believe I have to say this, Whoop-Dee by CJ broke through in the top 10, mostly thanks to a massive sales boost this week that I'm not at all convinced will last, plus a ton of streaming and slow radio growth. Whoopee. But anyway, our losers and dropouts. There weren't that many bigger dropouts this week, just Champagne Night by Lady A, mashed with Savage Love by Josh685 and Jason Derulo finally making its exit, but we also don't really have a lot of losers either. Of course, off the debut, Skin by Sabrina Carpenter crashed down to 97, and then we had the expected slips for Bad Boy by Late Juice WRLD and Young Thug to 73, and Mr. Right Now by 21 Savage, Metro Boomin, and featuring Drake at 100. Unfortunately, pulling Prisoner by Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa down to 97. Hell, it seems like for every loss that I don't mind, like the continued failure of Monster by Shawn Mendes and Justin Bieber down to 85, oof. Then we also got Diamonds by Sam Smith down at 59. I hate to say it, but it's probably going to be gone next week and it'll wound up being caught between years. What a shame. But on the topic of disappointments, 7 Summers by Morgan Wallen fell down to 35, but it's worth noting that the majority of his chart placements did not collapse like this one did. He might have lost radio for at least the short term, but controversy led to a sales and streaming spike, and suspended record contracts are not the same as getting dropped by his label. Trust me when I say this, he'll be back way sooner than you think, for better or more likely for worse. Hell, if you think I'm kidding, guess which one of his songs is among our returns this week? Yep, it's the mediocre title track Dangerous from his album at 98. Dragging along Almost Maybes by Jordan Davis at 99. I was gonna say crap like this sticks together, but you know what, for as bad as Jordan Davis is, as far as I know, he's not on the path that Morgan Wallen is. thank God for that, I guess. Beyond that, and Pick Up Your Feelings by Jasmine Sullivan making a return at 92, the other major story of this week was the deluxe reissue of Lil Durk's album The Voice, which led to returns for Backdoor at 95 and Stay Down with Black and Young Thug at 87. Hell, when we go to our gains, it also saw a recovery for Still Trappin' with the late King Von up to 70. But beyond that, not that many gains either, with Lady by Brett Young getting a small boost to 75, and the twin headaches of that dire Goosebumps remix by Travis Scott and Hume at 63, and Cry Baby by Megan Thee Stallion featuring DaBaby at 43. I mean, I called the latter song getting traction, and I really wish I hadn't. But you know what? Speaking of stuff that I would rather not hear, we got a pretty small but reasonable list of new arrivals. And unfortunately, we have to start with number 96, Fake Woke by Tom MacDonald. There are a few different ways to approach this. Probably the most efficient is to face the cold reality that this only charted because of sales and maybe a little bit of YouTube. It's not going to last into next week. It's not getting radio or streaming enough to move units. It's here on a flicker of controversy, buoyed by a congresswoman who is riding the fascist QAnon grift cult until the charges start rolling in. And while it is very tempting to view Tom MacDonald as just another trolling grifter who hasn't put any of his recent albums on streaming services because it would just expose just how lifelessly bankrupt and legit kind of gross his content has become, in affect, it doesn't really matter, because there's a whole lot of angry white boys who only listen to real hip-hop who followed us over from the chopper crowd to this bigoted edgelord loser. I mean, you get the audience you deserve. Funnily enough, this doofus is Canadian. You can't claim you're American in the first verse, buddy. I'm calling you on it. But just like Tory Lanez, you could argue that he's playing to the lowest possible common denominator of rotten conservative machismo and culture. Well, let's be real, that stuff exists up here too. But you know what, if you're also going hunting for truth in what he's spewing, you're kind of missing the point. I could debunk all his all lives matter nonsense in the second verse, or how he claims that the police are underfunded, or how by his third verse is the expected red pill slut shaming and feminazi talking points that were kind of out of fashion by 2016. But you know what? I'm not a liberal. I don't need to humor his bad arguments because, well, the facts don't care about his feelings either here, so I'm sure he won't mind me pointing out that his forced flow is the definition of generic white rapper. The production sounds like it was imported from the recovery era. His synths sound like wet farts, and he just cannot sing. So the hook is just flat auto-tune mush. But I do want to highlight the conceit of this song, because for as much as he believes that cancel culture now runs the world, he doesn't actually believe anyone really buys into fighting systemic issues of inequality, because identity politics are just a ploy to him to climb up the capitalist ladder. It's just those people doing it. And there's a lot of straight white guys on the left who believe this too, and that's the bigger problem that a lot of folks want to address. A lot of y'all want to laugh at him because he's corny and he's cringeworthy, and let's face it, it's really easy, but you also don't want to do the work to examine how much your own beliefs might align with his, and that's a deeper issue. But what I find deeply ironic about this is that Tom MacDonald's brand of dog whistle sloganeering is set up to climbing his own capitalist ladder in this subculture. So even if he's a true believer, and his deep cut suggests that he might be, there is something just so calculated about how he chooses to put the names of Eminem, Cardi B, and now the ex-POS in chief in his very first verse. You gotta get that search optimization up here, man. Almost like he's buying into the same monetization pipeline that the rest of them do. But you know what? I don't give fascist propagandists any quarter here, Tommy boy. Welcome to the mainstream chart gristmill, where your low-quality sound is too dated, derivative, drab, shallow, and let's not forget corny for your lies to even get much traction. Capitalism eats everyone, but your trash, it's not even a light snack. Number 91, Kanye Crazy by Lil Durk.
Kanye crazy, Kanye crazy, I'm going Kanye crazy.
Okay, let's go into a rapper who actually has a possible future in the mainstream. Yeah, that's the other thing, Tommy boy. He's not backed by any label, and the second he tried to play it in the mainstream, his Vancouver ass would totally get smoked. But this is one of 3 songs from Lil Durk that actually charted, with a pretty regrettable comparison on the hook and title of the song. I mean, I know you're both from Chicago, but comparing yourself to Kanye West, even his crazy side in 2021, just not a good look. Now, the idea of the song isn't precisely bad, comparing Kanye West's antics to the real-life crazy shit that Lil Durk has had to endure with violence and police interrogations, maybe showing a parallel in their trauma and hell, maybe his run deeper. But I gotta be honest, I'm not sure Lil Durk needed that comparison to make his point, and thus it comes across a little bit like clickbait, especially with this video. Now, I do think the actual instrumental is pretty decent. The guitar keening behind the shuddering trap beat and the piano touches, that's not bad, but otherwise it just feels a little bit abortive and kind of undercooked. Feels more like a concept than a full song, and I gotta be honest, it's not a great concept. Fine enough, but if he wanted to make this work, it was a few drafts away from quality. Just saying. Number 74, Baila Conmigo by Selena Gomez featuring Rauw, Alejandro. There is a part of me that's kind of impressed by just how much Selena Gomez is really committing to this Spanish language project, this time recruiting Puerto Rican rapper Rauw Alejandro to get him his first charting single stateside after dropping his debut last year. Now, I'll admit I'm not exactly loving his vocal timbre. Reminds me a little bit of a less weedy Ozuna than I would personally prefer, especially against the very plucky acoustics and the spongy reggaeton groove. But he does have okay chemistry in making a sensual dance jam with Selena Gomez, especially as the content plays into just how much she might not understand, but is able to catch that vibe. That being said, to me it feels a little bit more formulaic than what Selena Gomez was trying on her first single in this vein, and this feels kind of a bit stodgy. It's not bad, but it's kind of generic. Doesn't really grip me. Number 71, Gravity by Brent Faiyaz and DJ Dahi featuring Tyler, the Creator.
Don't you want me alone? Baby, I'm acting. You held me up when I was down and out.
I was hearing so much hype for this song, specifically from my friends, that Brent Faiyaz had once again struck gold with a new single, but I gotta admit I was a bit dubious, given that I barely remember from him on that song with Gold Link, and while DJ Dahi and Tyler are good co-stars, I was kinda skeptical. But yeah, it actually is pretty damn good. Pretty heavily linked to the gentle bouts of Steve Lacy's guitar and bass line, and just how well Brent Faiyaz can play off it with a loose, Miguel-esque charm. But there's an interesting conceit to watching him deflect from his likely soon-to-be ex-partner's attention, and it has just enough awkwardness in the conversation from both him and Tyler in order to make that impression stick. There is this certain low-key charm to how the references and storytelling shamble across the verses, which is one reason I gotta admit I don't really love how they tacked on the air horns, or how they pitched down Brent Faiyaz's voice for the first verse to imply the gravity of it all. I mean, it's a pretty on-the-nose musical motif, feels a bit heavy-handed. I will say that I'm happy to have a song with this particular sort of indie R&B palette that's charting now, especially given how well the multi-tracked harmonies will translate. But I will also say that it feels like the sort of song that might demand more listens to really grab me a lot more deeply. It's very solid, it's very likable, but not sure it's great for me just yet. That's all. Number 53, Should've Ducked by Lil Durk featuring Pooh, Shiesty. Are we just gonna have to become used to Pooh Shiesty building traction in the mainstream now? Because on our next Lil Durk song, the entire second verse is from him. We don't even get a hook to split things up. And I think I figured out my frustration with Pooh Shiesty. He sounds like Gucci Mane, except with a flow that's both kind of faster and also sloppier, which translates to just how many syllables are being dropped as the bars will trail on. And from there, the song almost feels like a mixtape freestyle, where they will ramble about some current gang conflicts, and once you manage to parse through all the references and slang, the second line of Pooh Shiesty's verse, I thought he was actually talking about chopping off somebody's dick, but turns out he's referring to a gun, or at least I sure as hell hope he is. And with a lot of the bare bones trap instrumental here, and again, no hook, the song just kind of peters out off of Pooh Shiesty's ad-libs. At least Gucci Mane can have occasionally stronger hooks than this. Again, this feels like a tacked on fragment because this guy is catching heat right now, and gotta be honest, not really impressed. But finally, number 39, Finesse Out the Gangway by Lil Durk featuring Lil Baby. So this looks like it's being pushed as the big reason to make this deluxe reissue, and that it's the only new song that charted that feels more complete. And I gotta say, there is a lot that works here. I really like the production behind the jittery pianos, behind the drill trap beat. Yeah, the drum machine can feel a little bit flat on the snares, but the faster tempo does keep a lot of momentum, and Lil Durk can ride it pretty well and dial into some of the bloody pathos of his come up and how rough things really are right now. I think it helps that he's a little bit more honest and emotive about how he was never really a success story. He's been in the game a decade, and he feels increasingly haunted by the life that he can't quite escape, and then Lil Baby happens. Now, he does come in pretty focused, with a lot of energy, until he disparages his competition by calling them feminine, which is kind of dangerous right now when the majority of women coming up in rap could rip him to shreds, and then the verse just turns into another generic come-up flex where he can barely even stay on rhythm, especially by the end. The song seems built for the remix that does not have Lil Baby on it, which means, while I can see how this could have worked and a version of the song might work in the future, this doesn't completely stick the landing. Man, I wish it did. Could have been great. But yeah, this week's kind of a mixed bag, but the best and worst, they're obvious. Fake Woke by MacDonald, it takes the worst by a country mile. I mean, don't ask him what country though. His mewling, try-hard bragging might crack under the pressure of actually delivering a second charting single below the Hot 100. And the best, obviously Gravity by Brent Faiyaz, DJ Dahi, and Tyler the Creator. Next week though, see, that Pooh Shiesty mixtape dropped. That could make an impact of some kind. Not guaranteed, but very much possible. But hey, until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.